Hello everyone, so today I'm going to talk about a slightly different, though to me very interesting topic, failures. In particular, I'm going to talk about some of my failed projects, such as when I tried to create a successful mobile game studio or when I tried to launch a startup with a friend of mine. So I'm going to talk about the backstories, what I did wrong, and the things you can learn from my mistakes to hopefully avoid them. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. Talking about the first failure of this video, I was in high school, and as most teenagers that knew how to program, my dream was creating a successful mobile game. You see, after Flappy Bird came out and the news on how much money that simple game was making, a lot of people jumped on a hype train and started creating games, and I was no exception. The plan was really simple: create some basic games, publish them to the store, and then become rich, right? So I started creating my first game, and I first had to choose which framework to use. And at that time there was this thing called the Corona SDK, which, by the way, I know that in 2020 doesn't sound like a great name, but it basically allowed developers to create cross-platform mobile games using a scripting language known as Lua, which is, by the way, super simple, similar to Python with some quirks. For example, arrays start from 1 rather than 0. 10 days in and my first game was ready, Gravity Run. It was a pretty bad game. You basically had to keep the square on the screen by clicking left and right and dodging obstacles. So I created my Google developer account for a whopping 25 euros, which especially at the time felt like a real investment, and I published it to the store and waited for thousands of users to download it. Of course, that doesn't happen, especially by itself, so I started promoting the game in all the ways I could. For example, I started writing a ton of emails to blogs and YouTubers. So most of them didn't even reply, and the ones who did asked for money, which especially at the time I didn't have, except for one small Italian YouTuber that featured Gravity Run in one of his videos for a short while. That video got me about 6,000 downloads on the Play Store and around 30 euros in ads revenue, which might not seem like a lot, but to the younger me, that was a great achievement. And so here it comes, my first big mistake. I thought, if working 10 days on a bad game got me 30 euros, then working many months on a fancy game would get me much more money, right? And so I started developing my second game, Tepzi, which was a huge project for me at the time. It was a turn-based online multiplayer puzzle game in which basically players will challenge each other to get the highest score at this puzzle, which consisted in connecting the numbers together so that the sum will be equal to the number above. And I spent a lot of time and effort trying to make this game look as good as possible. I also added a lot of other features such as custom skins, a store, credits, and really a lot of features. And even though from outside these games might look somewhat nice, trust me, this was a huge spaghetti code monster. At the time I wasn't a very good programmer, so in order to put together a game this complex, I really built something that was not maintainable. It was a real mess, okay? And so I published it to the store and promoted it in the same way I did with Gravity Run. And nobody ever answered. So here I was, after 5 months of hard work, with a game with less than 50 downloads and absolutely zero revenue. And so, besides the technical problems, the biggest mistake was the initial wrong assumption I made. Because, you see, success is not linear. It's not like if you work twice as hard, you'll get twice the results. In fact, if I spent those 5 months producing many smaller games, I would have had a higher probability of succeeding, at least with one of them. And besides that, the mobile game market is super saturated, so unless you're really into that, I would personally avoid that market entirely. Let's now talk about my failed startup attempt. So I was in my third year of university, and with a friend of mine, we really wanted to build something together. So an afternoon, I've got a pretty simple idea. We wanted to create an app to turn any smartphone and tablet into a customizable control panel to control PC and macOS applications. So basically, if you know what a Steam Deck is, it was the same thing but with an app to control your PC applications. And so we started building it immediately. And we did so because we thought the idea was cool. And so we kept on adding features, making the design look good. We built a website, bought a domain, Duki.io. And so after 8 months, we discovered that our university startup incubator program was starting, we applied. We just thought, you know what, let's build a startup around this project. So the first selection came by, and out of 300 to 400 startup ideas, only 30 were selected, and somehow we were one of them. In fact, we got the highest score among all startup proposals, and needless to say, we were super excited about that. The incubator program was composed of a series of lessons in which they taught us the basics of starting a startup, a business in general, and one of the key areas of focus was early validation. You see, ideally, when you start a business, you want to make sure first that you are actually solving a real problem, and then that there are users willing to pay for your solution. Otherwise, there is no point even start implementing it. At that point, we realized that we made a big mistake. We worked for more than a year on a prototype that nobody besides us ever tried. So we needed to validate the idea as soon as possible. So our target users were graphical designers. We wanted to create control panels for Photoshop, Illustrators, all those complex graphical applications. And so, being inside an incubator, we got the opportunity to talk with all the designers that worked there. And so we let them try our new prototype, and at first they were all very excited about it. But then when they tried it, it became clear that the project was not going to work. And the problem was that graphical designers were so used to using keyboard shortcuts that moving the hand away from the keyboard to reach the smartphone was detrimental to productivity. So really, the idea was not going to work. I still remember a phrase that one of those designers said me, and she said, "How can two engineers know what a designer needs?" And that phrase hurt more than a bullet in my chest, because she was right. We built the whole project around a wrong assumption. We thought we knew what designers needed without even talking to them first. And that was a fatal mistake. Soon after, we decided to leave the incubator program because the more feedback we've got, the less the idea seemed valid. And trust me, that was super painful. We basically threw away more than a year and a half of very hard work. But that also taught me some very important lessons. First of all, if you are trying to build a business, you should really spend a lot of time trying to really understand the problem you are trying to solve. First of all, you have to determine whether that problem is real or not, and then you have to understand your customers. And to do so, feedback is key. You really have to talk with your customers to see whether your solution is valuable to them. You have to create value. That's the whole point of creating a business. In conclusion, everyone will experience some failures throughout its life, and they will be different from person to person. You might fail taking an exam, you might fail landing a job or getting a date with your crush. In fact, the more things you try, the higher the number of failures you will experience. What really matters is your attitude towards them. Failures should always be seen as a way to learn and improve yourself, so that hopefully one day you will not repeat the same mistakes twice. Alright, so that was all for this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video, because it really helps. And lately I've not been posting a lot of videos, and I'm sorry for that. I've been going through a very busy period of my life. I promise that in a couple of months I'll start posting more videos, more content regularly. So with that being said, see you in the next video.